Every single year, you're finding a way to improve your team before the fantasy playoffs, before your trade deadline, whatever that is for your fantasy league. And today I'm bringing you the toughest schedules for the wide receiver and running back position, and the top easiest schedule for the running back and the wide receiver position. Not only that, I'm bringing you A+ players, 4 trade away and 4 trade for players that you should be targeting before the fantasy playoffs. This is clearly based off the fantasy playoffs, which is, once again, only weeks away. So let's not waste any more time as we have so much information to get into. Let's get straight into the video. Before we get into all the information, I just want to make a little note to let you guys know I'm only going to be covering weeks 15, 16, and 17, because week 14 there are some teams that do have a bye week, and in week 18 a lot of teams do rest their key players. So if your fantasy league does have week 14 or 18 fantasy playoffs, we do recommend maybe you change that later on in the next year, not this year but next year for sure. I think it's too late to change it, so keep that in mind. I'm only be going through weeks 15, 16, and 17. Let's get straight into it. As you can probably see the graphic on your screen, the running back playoffs easiest strength of schedule for the fantasy playoffs. I'm bringing you the top 10 easiest teams and players. You can probably see there's so many names, but as you can see here, the teams that are highlighted blue are the teams that appear here more than once. Maybe they play a top 10 easy strength of schedule team twice or even 3 times here. And one of the teams and players that do stand out that maybe you can go out and trade for, maybe you have to pay a premium, is Austin Ekeler. You can see Austin Ekeler in week 1 playing the Denver Broncos twice, in week 15 and week 17. That is clearly a league winner here. There's no doubt in my mind that you can see that Austin Ekeler is going to have a phenomenal strength of schedule. If you can maybe pivot to somebody that I'm going to be talking earlier when we talk about the toughest strength of schedules, maybe think about pivoting to an Austin Ekeler. What about a Bijan Robinson? I know he has been a little bit up and down, but Arthur Smith, probably one of the hatest fantasy head coaches in the NFL. He hates fantasy football here. But Bijan Robinson, you can see even going into the second easiest strength of schedule there with the Carolina Panthers, and then you can see against the Chicago Bears in week 16. So not even that. You also have him in week 16 against the Indianapolis Colts. There are so many running backs here that you can look at. DeAndre Swift as well. The Arizona Cardinals in week 17. Same thing with the Seattle Seahawks in week 15. They do have a lot of easy strength of schedule type of players. So keep that in mind. There are some tough matchups for some of these players. So don't just think that, hey, these guys has a really good 1-2 punch. They might have, for example, Austin Ekeler. He plays, the Broncos in week 15 and week 17, but maybe in week 16 he plays the Cleveland Browns. That can be really tough for you, so definitely keep that in mind. Let's go to the running back's toughest strength of schedule here. Once again, players that are highlighted in blue are players that appear here the most, right? More than once, okay? And all these players, I would definitely be looking to pivot for the players that we saw in the easier strength of schedule. Maybe that is an Austin Ekeler. Maybe that's a Bijan Robinson, a Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Swift. We also saw on that easy strength of schedule, a Josh Jacobs. Okay, so definitely keep that in mind. If you want to go look back at that, go pause the video, have a look, maybe write the names down and say, okay, that's who I have in my team. And then let's look at the toughest strength of schedules here. Look, there's a couple names that definitely stand out to me that a lot of people have been asking about lately. Saquon Barkley is definitely the first one, who plays, the Philadelphia Eagles here in week 16. Then he plays the New Orleans Saints in week 15. He does have a very difficult strength of schedule matchup. Not only that offense is not producing. Yes, he is going to be a guy that's getting all the carries on the ground. I'm just not necessarily sure what that's going to look like. I think they're going to be playing a lot of different scenarios here, because I'll be honest with you, I'm really believing that my Giants do tank here. So keep that in mind. Another tough matchup for some of these running backs here is Joe Mixon in week 15 against the Minnesota Vikings, as you can see there. And then also against the Kansas City Chiefs in week 17. That's going to be a tough matchup. They should be a high-scoring game in week 17 in your fantasy championship. Maybe it's not the best time to start Joe Mixon, where they're gonna maybe result in throwing the ball a little bit more. Someone that's really surprising to me that popped up in this list here. Not saying that maybe you should trade him away, but definitely keep an eye out on, because we saw how they struggled against the San Francisco 49ers, and that is Travis Etienne, right? You see him in week 15 against the Baltimore Ravens, and we've seen the Baltimore Ravens absolutely dominate some of these running backs in these backfields and then take over the game. What if that happens against the Jacksonville Jaguars and they abandon the run? Yes, Travis Etienne does catch the ball often, but we thought that against the San Francisco 49ers, that just wasn't the case. Same thing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think this one's a little bit different because the Bucs definitely do let opposing teams score. And if Travis Etienne does get into the red zone, I can see him scoring. But just keep that in mind. Maybe Travis Etienne, can you send a Travis Etienne away for an Austin Ekeler? I'll be interested in that because of how easy Austin Ekeler's strength of schedule is. Another one that really popped into mind here that I don't think a lot of people are necessarily realizing is Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert. And this one is once again very interesting here. You can see on your screen week 16, and the 10th hardest schedule for Devon is week 16 against the Dallas Cowboys, and then also in week 17, which gives you the 8th hardest schedule amongst running backs here, were the Baltimore Ravens. Once again, I'm not saying that Devon is not going to be good or produce or not break out for a good run, but can I pivot to somebody that I may feel a little bit better? Now, his upside is extremely high, but someone, like I said earlier, in the easiest strength of schedule, hopefully you paused and maybe wrote some of these names down, is a Josh Jacobs, right? Josh Jacobs appears in that list twice. He plays the Chargers and the Indianapolis Colts. What if it was a Bijan Robinson and Austin Ekeler? Some of these names are pretty big that maybe you can go ahead and pivot from. And Devon's coming off a bye week coming off of IR. So maybe you're going to have an opportunity to sell him high at some points. Okay, so keep that in mind. That is the running back position, the toughest and easiest strength of schedule for the running back positions. And let's get to the wide receivers. Okay, now we're looking into the wide receivers, the top 10 defenses that give up the most points to the wide receiver position. And a couple of names stand out here. Obviously, some of them will be obvious. Some of them you may have to pay a premium, or some of them you're saying, hey, maybe you can take a chance on them as a flex option. One that definitely stands out to me, there's a couple, and I'll obviously go over them. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, that is somebody you can definitely go ahead and target, playing the Washington Commanders in week 15, and then my beloved New York Giants in week 17 there. Maybe you can go and snag either one of those guys for a good price. Maybe trade one of your running backs that has a tough matchup for an easier wide receiver schedule. That can be something interesting that you can look into. What about the Seattle Seahawks wide receivers? You can see they play the Philadelphia Eagles in week 15, then the Tennessee Titans in week 16. That is a very interesting matchup there, whether that is Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba, or DK Metcalf. Personally, I wouldn't be targeting DK Metcalf or Jackson Smith and Jigba. The one I would be targeting would be Tyler Lockett. I feel like if there's anyone that's going to shine specifically against the Eagles, which is a high-scoring game, it's going to be Tyler Lockett. And then the same thing with the Tennessee Titans. So keep that in mind. Chase and T. Higgins, you can see in week 16 against the Pittsburgh Steelers and in week 15 against the Minnesota Vikings as well. And one that really stood out to me that I really love, that maybe a lot of people can go out and get, and I think this is really doable, not for a high price, Nico Collins and or Tank Dell. You can see at number 5 here against the Tennessee Titans, Nico Collins plays and Tank Dell play the Tennessee Titans. Clearly a divisional game, week 15 and week 17. One of the best strength of schedules here for a wide receiver. And obviously CJ Stroud is balling here. So if you need a high upside player, and in a matchup that I would say is going to be really good here, because the Tennessee Titans are decent against the run. They're not top 10, but they are middle of the pack defense. So I'm not necessarily sure Devin Singletary is going to run all over them, even though he just had a career high in 30 touches. But something that could happen is that, Nico Collins and or Tank Dell could take off in one of those weeks. And an honorable mention here, I know this name may not be sexy, is Courtland Sutton. You can see Courtland Sutton here week 15 against the Detroit Lions, and then against the Los Angeles Chargers, a divisional matchup in week 17. He has scored a touchdown, I'm pretty sure now, in 7 out of his last 8 games so far this year. And he had that toe tag drop against the Buffalo Bills, which looked phenomenal. So definitely keep that in mind when you're looking for a wide receiver. Now going to the toughest strength of schedule for the wide receiver position. Once again, top 10 toughest strength of schedules here. The ones that you see in blue are here multiple times. Once again, some of these names you're seeing here and you're saying, well, I don't know if I'm trading them away because they're high upside. I get it, but I wonder if you can pivot. Now, the one that I wouldn't trade away, as you can see here, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they actually appear here every single week. Their toughest strength of schedule here for the fantasy wide receivers. Week 15 against the New York Jets, Hill and Waddle. Week 16 against the Dallas Cowboys. And week 17 against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, there's no doubt about it. There's no way I'm trading Tyreek Hill away. No way whatsoever. But I would be interested in trading away a Jalen Waddle. And maybe we can look into maybe another wide receiver here. And you could do it in a package, whatever that looks like. Can you trade a Jalen Waddle and maybe get a Nico Collins? Maybe get a Puka Nacua? Maybe get, a T. Higgins, right? Those are the type of wide receivers I'm looking to pivot off of. Tyreek Hill is still going to produce, in my personal opinion. He's still going to do his thing, and every single one of these games should be high scoring. I would say outside of the Jets have a pretty good secondary, and if Aaron Rodgers does come back by Thanksgiving or the middle of December, that can be something that can be really interesting here for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Another one that is also very interesting is Calvin Ridley and Christian Kirk. You can see here in week 15, Calvin Ridley against the Baltimore Ravens with Christian Kirk in week 15. Also in week 17, you can see against the Carolina Panthers, who currently give up the second least amount of fantasy points to the wide receiver position, which is very interesting, but they do. So definitely keep that in mind. I think that is a matchup that you have to keep an eye out on. DJ Moore is my third one, I'm willing to pivot off of. Same thing. Can I get a Puka? Can I get a T. Higgins? Can I get a Tyler Lockett or a package of an assortment of some talented wide receivers? Can I get a Hollywood Brown maybe? That can be very interesting because Hollywood Brown does have an easy strength of schedule. Not one that I mentioned, but one that you can see on the graphic a little bit earlier. DJ Moore playing against the Cleveland Browns in week 15 and week 17. He is playing against the Atlanta Falcons, going against AJ Terrell. Okay, and another one just for good mention here, I think that I will be interested in pivoting from would be Mike Evans and or Chris Godwin. You can see week 15, Evans and Chris Godwin against the Green Bay Packers. Jair Alexander, you expect him to be healthy against Mike Evans. And then in week 17, Marshawn Lattimore, and I know he has an injury. Let's see how long, if he's going to be out for the rest of the season or if he's going to be back. I know last report I saw he was going to be day-to-day, but we all know the history with Marshawn Lattimore and Mike Evans. If I can pivot from Evans and or Godwin to, once again, any one of those names, Hollywood Brown, maybe can I get a Chris Olave? Can I get a Devonta Smith? Any of one of those names that you can think of and maybe try and get that I named a little bit earlier in the easier strength of schedule, that's exactly what I'll be doing, guys. So hopefully that is helpful. Still, the video's not over. I'm bringing you an extra 8 players that you can trade for and or trade away. Let's get straight into that. Okay, going into my top 4 trade for players, and I don't want to spend too much time in this. So these are going to be honorable mentions with some hints of little nuggets of why you should be trading for these players. If not, this video will be 40, 50, even an hour long, and I don't want to do that to you guys. So once again, my top 4 players, and I'm going to be dissolving it little by little. My first player here you can see is Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith is somebody that Zach and I have kind of been mentioning, hey, maybe you should go out and trade for him, purely because of Dallas Goedert. Obviously, Dallas Goedert did have a fracture in his forearm, and we all know how tough the rest of the season schedule is. Not tough, but something that we need to look out for, because these playoff schedules for these teams need to be high scoring games, right? The Seattle Seahawks, this one, that is definitely should be a high scoring game. Now the New York Giants should be a high scoring game, but should be ending early. And then the Arizona Cardinals now with Kyler Murray back. These are some competitive teams. 2 out of those 3 games are competitive. And Devonta Smith has seen a little bit more production without Dallas Goedert. Once again, little nuggets here. Dallas Goedert, the games, even going back to last year, Dallas Goedert didn't play 5 games, and you can see the difference with and without Dallas Goedert in the game. He's Devonta Smith averaging 15.8 fantasy points versus the 14.2 fantasy points that we've seen. Not a massive jump in production, but something that's saying, hey, can I get that extra 1 or 2 points? That is a difference maker when you think of your fantasy playoffs. Going to my next player here is Hollywood Brown. This one's very exciting for me here because Hollywood Brown is somebody that I'm willing to trade for. And that was also in my strength of schedule as well. Now, I didn't mention him because I was going to mention them here. Hollywood Brown's strength of schedule is something really exciting. He's playing the Arizona Cardinals in week 15. Playing the San Francisco 49ers in week 15, who currently give the 7th most points to the wide receiver position. Then he goes and plays the Philadelphia Eagles in week 17, who currently give up the 2nd most points to the wide receiver position. And in week 16, now the Chicago Bears aren't part of the top 10, but they do give up a good amount of points to the wide receiver position there for Hollywood Brown. And we've seen him with Kyler Murray last year. The first 6 weeks of the season, he was a top 6 wide receiver, averaging over 18 fantasy points per game. Now that Kyler Murray's back, that is the hope and expectation. Now, I know he had a bad game here, but understand he was playing AJ Terrell. Kyler Murray was still getting his feet underneath him, and especially in that second half of the season, when they do start getting these wins, they're going to have to hopefully make the playoffs, which sounds crazy right now. But if they can win out, this Arizona Cardinals team can make the playoffs here. So that is my next player in Hollywood Brown. Now, my next player here at the running back position, Jerome Ford. Now with Deshaun Watson out, you have to expect this team to run the ball a little bit more. Darius Thompson-Robinson, I was right. He is the quarterback, at least starting in week 11. I'm pretty sure PJ Walker will be the starter the remainder part of the season. But we've seen how Jerome Ford has been working over 65% of the work, just up to 65% of the workload we've seen the past couple of weeks. He's been running the ball and toking the ball over 20 times nearly per game, and he's been getting a lot of work in the air. And once again, another one with the fantasy playoffs that is very favorable coming into this week here. So if you think of the fantasy playoffs here for Jerome Ford against the Chicago Bears in week 15, who give up the 6th most fantasy points to the wide receiver position, and then against the New York Jets. Now the New York Jets, quote unquote, yeah, they do have a good secondary, but they give up a lot of points to the running back position, who give up the 10th most points to the running back position. So Jerome Ford is my 3rd buy player here. And my last buy player, this is just based off production. This is based off how he is looking recently. And this is based off my projection of what he is going to do. And that is Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams in the past 2 games has toked the ball over 21 times, had an opportunity. In week 8 against Kansas City, he had a total touches of 30 touches. Against Buffalo, which we saw was explosive, had a total of 25 touches. Javonte Williams is back. Okay, he had his bye week. He is somebody that is getting healthy, and that's exactly what I want to see here. He's playing the Lions, the Patriots, and the Chargers. Now, all those defenses are either middle of the pack defenses that give up, a middle pack points to the running back position. But we always said after the bye week, Javonte Williams should be back. So Devonta Smith, Hollywood Brown, and Jerome Ford with Javonte Williams are my top buy players going into the fantasy playoffs. Now let's get into my sells. Okay, going into my top 4 sell high players, or just sell players in general to get them off your team for the fantasy playoffs. My beloved Saquon Barkley. Yes, Saquon Barkley is somebody that I do recommend that you should trade away. Now he is playing, and hear this fantasy schedule, and I kind of spoke about him a little briefly earlier in the video, against the New Orleans Saints in week 15, who currently give up the 9th least amount of fantasy points to the running back position. And then in week 16 against the Philadelphia Eagles, who currently give up the least amount of points to the running back position. The reason why I want to sell Saquon Barkley is because I do believe the New York Giants are going to tote the ball with him, but he's not going to have the upside that you hope and expect him to have. So if you can trade him away for kind of the players that I said earlier in the video, an Austin Eckler, a Bijan Robinson, a DeAndre Swift, Josh Jacobs, for name's sake, that is something that I'm willing to do. Maybe can you sell him for someone that I mentioned earlier to trade for, a Javonte Williams or Jerome Ford, and maybe get some sort of a package, a 2-for-1 deal or a 2-for-2 deal, whatever that looks like. But Saquon Barkley is my first player you should be trading away. Staying at the running back position here, another one is Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is somebody that I'm willing to trade away purely based off strength of schedule. He is somebody also that was on the strength of schedule, had one of the toughest strength of schedules as well. I didn't mention him, but you can see in week 15 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who give the third least amount of fantasy points to the running back position. And then in week 17 against the Minnesota Vikings, who give the sixth least amount of fantasy points to the running back position. Not only that, he's been very inconsistent. I'm not necessarily sure if he's going to be healthy for the rest of the season. And why? Because he's already had his bye week. Remember, he had his bye week and he came back, he had only 8 fantasy points, saying, well, he should be healthy. I'm not necessarily sure he is going to be healthy. And the Green Bay Packers are struggling to move the ball down the field with or without Aaron Jones. So he is somebody that I'm willing to pivot away, maybe based off namesake, because there are a lot of people that are saying, hey, what about Aaron Jones? I can deal with him. You know, he's still questionable. Even as I'm recording this video, he was limited with that hamstring. So he has been dealing with that hamstring, you know, since week 1, since training camp, and he's still not healthy. So I'm willing to trade and move on from him. Going to the wide receiver position here, Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen is somebody that I'm willing to walk away from, and that's purely based off of, I think you can get better players. And he, not only that, he does have a tough strength of schedule. Okay, let me not just say, because I think he can get better, but I truly believe he does have a tough strength of schedule, as we can see in the graphic earlier before. Adam Thielen, week 15 against the Atlanta Falcons, and then in week 16 against the Green Bay Packers against Jair Alexander and AJ Terrell. Bryce Young hasn't been playing amazing, but yes, he has been getting the targets. He's still wide receiver 9, but can I pivot to somebody better? You know, can I pivot to one of these wide receivers that have a high upside type of play or easier strength of schedule? Can I pivot to a Hollywood Brown? Can I pivot to a Higgins? Can I pivot to a Puka? Can I pivot to any one of those guys that I mentioned in that easier strength of schedule here? Because once again, he does have a tough strength of schedule. And yes, Frank Wright is going to be getting the play calling back, but it doesn't really matter because that strength of schedule is not in favor of Adam Thielen. And last but not least, another one of my beloved, my guy this year, that is DJ Moore, which is still trending in the right direction. Doesn't mean that he's not going to have an easy strength of schedule against the Cleveland Browns in week 15, against once again AJ Terrell in week 17 here, and in week 16 he is going against the Arizona Cardinals, who are pretty good against, well, they give a decent amount of points to the wide receiver position, but I will be saying that I'm not necessarily sure if I want to lean on that. I know Justin Fields is going to be back, but I don't want the inconsistencies with DJ Moore in the fantasy playoffs, especially in the championship, guys. So here, once again, Saquon Barkley, Aaron Jones, Adam Thielen, and DJ Moore. Hopefully that is helpful. Hopefully you get the W going into the rest of the season. Hopefully you get into the playoffs. And don't forget to check out the defensive streamer videos that I brought out. And I also brought out a quarterback streamer video. Didn't see too much love there, but it's quarterbacks. You know, quarterbacks are up and down. But defense, wide receivers, running backs, and quarterbacks I've all brought for you. Hopefully that is helpful, and good luck in the fantasy playoffs.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.